So I was not going to talk about this, specifically because there's going to be a million videos talking about this. Gojo has returned. Yippee. It's a pretty exciting time, obviously. It's been, 1,200 odd days, close to that, which is 3 to 4 odd years, depending on breaks, etc. So it's been a very long time since we've seen Gojo, and his presence, his appearance, and pretty much the pressure that he brings to the story is ever more overwhelming. If anything, it's more overwhelming than it ever has been, and rightfully so. We're going into the end of the story. We have some of the most powerful characters doing a lot of things, and Gojo is just here, ready to throw hands. It's exciting, but also for me, a little bit saddening. It puts into perspective the ending of Kaisen, that we are genuinely within the final stretch of this story, and most likely the fight that's going to happen within this set time period between, I think it was November 19th to December 24th, which that date in itself is very symbolic to Geto, to Gojo, the history between them, the sorcery world, etc. The traversal between that month is going to be very fascinating, and by the time we actually have that fight, it's most likely going to be the conclusion of the story, or at least kicking off the final chapters of the story. This is it. There's no elongating it. There's no adding a whole new arc or this or that just to beefing things up. Quite literally within this year, we could be at the end of Kaisen, maybe at the latest, early 2024. This shouldn't come as a surprise. Akutami has directly told us that he would be ending it in the next handful of years a couple of years ago. He even made a comment that he wants to end it this year. And so as much as it may be hard to believe his words and how much he goes back on things and the difficulties of creating manga in general, very unpredictable, Gojo appearing sets it more in stone. It's a sad but also one of the greatest times to be a Kaisen fan. Now, if you have been reading the story since the beginning, or even just before Gojo was sealed away, you are rewarded very well for your patience, because his appearance, his demeanor, everything has kind of changed just a little bit. It's still Gojo, it's still familiar, but scary. It's unpredictable. We haven't seen him in 1,200 days, and we don't know how much time has passed within that box. And that's kind of the big stipulation they put over his release. It could be instant, it could be a blink of an eye, or it could be centuries. I don't know the limitations on that, but I would argue more so in favor of it being quite a bit amount of time. Just based on his appearance, even his clothing, even though he kind of fought before he actually got to Kenjaku, so maybe that's why he's a little bit tattered. He looks a lot more jacked, but you never really see him not jacked, just more so cloaked over, sleeper build, if that makes sense. So he's kind of always been well defined. Funny enough, I actually really enjoy his reveal because it's not really built up. With a character like him going into the ending of the story, you would naturally think, and you're not wrong for this, that there may be a little bit playful with building up his character reintroduction, bit by bit, kind of just setting the stepping stones to his release. And while you can kind of call a technicality there and saying that, yeah, the whole process of the culling games and getting Angel was that stepping stone, basically your attention was never directed towards Gojo. That's not a bad thing. You're focusing on many different aspects of the culling games and all these fights and these characters, and it's been a pretty wild time. Let's not forget that only a handful of chapters ago, Sukuna was changing up the story dynamics and taking over Megami's body and really throwing us a curveball. And just before that, we had Kenjaku go up against Yuki and survive like a black hole and reveal everything about Tengen for the most part. It's scary, to put simply, how much this has built up indirectly towards Gojo and not actually using him as a point of reference. That's impressive. Because of this, you actually get a reveal that's really, I don't want to say anticlimactic, but just nonchalant. It's effortless. It kind of just happens at a whim, and they back it with comedic value, which I actually really enjoy. Leading up to this point, you knew it was kind of happening. It felt like it was there, but because it was so unserious, because no one really knew what would happen or the results, if he would come out swinging, and that's when they mentioned time flows differently within the box, so they were genuinely scared that he would come out and just be wild. The best way that they capitalized on this, right, is when they actually did release him, the box disappeared and everyone was confused. Just for a second, and I know it's not really important, it's a very small thing, but you have been protecting the back end of this box this whole time because it's your key to release Gojo. Without this box, you're basically done because Kenjaku has the other half, and we found out where the other half was. So this is their access, right? They've held on to this through thick and thin, and it just vanishes in front of their eyes. the amount of anxiety that you would jump through seeing that happen in front of you would be so incredibly immense. I wouldn't know how to feel. And funny enough, you see that anxiety on Angel's face. At first, she's panicking and freaking out like she's done too much, and then she actually redirects it and saying like, well, you told me to do it, etc. And she goes on the offensive. It's brilliant. It works to kind of alleviate this tension or stress surrounding Gojo's release, and instead of kind of keeping you on the edge of your seat, it eases you in rather nicely. I think this is very purposeful in design. As much as Akutami could have easily built this up to be the most climatic release and not have any comedic value behind it, instead, it kind of just took it simply, step by step, characters stumbling over each other and kind of just leaving it up in the air. For me, it worked effortlessly. I enjoyed it, and it's something a little bit different. I think a good reason why the more serious climatic build-up for Gojo's release was avoided entirely is because of the after effects. That build-up mixed with Gojo's presence after his release would kind of cannibalize each other, and you wouldn't really have a clear defining line of pre-Gojo and after he's released. So to draw it clearer, you have this build-up that's very goofy and comedic and characters fumbling all over the place with his release, and then you have Gojo's presence, his energy, his aura, and they make sure to set the roots right within the chapter before his release to make you pay attention to it. What is his mental state going to be like? That's the first thing you probably notice, other than the fact that he looks a little different, which in reality you just haven't seen him all too often. He looks serious, but he also looks playful, very identical to that Toji era fight where he kind of let loose for the first time. So instead of saying that this is him angry or going insane or losing control, I think it'd be more accurate to say that this is just his truest self. He's in control, he's observant, he's thinking about everything, he's making the right decisions, and he's going about it in a very methodical way, but still having this overwhelming power behind him. At any moment, he could obliterate Kenjaku off the face of this earth, and he could kickstart the fight with Sukuna, but it doesn't come to that, which makes this confrontation kind of a lot more political than people think. For me, this is a clash of egos, because it's been built up for a long time that Gojo is the strongest of this era. Sukuna is the strongest thing to ever exist, and Kenjaku is the mitigator between these two. He's definitely strong within his own right, but he's nowhere near their level. You see this instantly. The differences between their egos, the differences between where they sit power-wise. And mind you, the empowerment of self-identity, having an ego, considering yourself a monster or a calamity is very different within Kaisen. It actually boosts your power in a way that is very unpredictable. It's kind of a blessing and a curse for sorcerers. If you do it, you will most likely never come back from it, and you will lose yourself in the form of death. They basically teach you to avoid it or harness the negativity of your own emotions into something more palatable. For the first time throughout the Culling games, you're seeing it activated within different nodes. Yuji was a prime example of Sukuna's own words being manifested, becoming that calamity and having overwhelming aggression, something that Sukuna told Yuta that he would never have. So seeing it with Yuji for the first time is scary. He is an anomaly. He might not have Sukuna anymore, but the fact that he is kind of considered a cursed object that is able to absorb other things, you're in for a wild ride with him, especially if he continues to use that aggression. Back to the Battle of Egos, however, and the symbolism behind it, Kenjaku chucked his box, the prison realm, into the ocean. Big trench, a lot of seals, a lot of curses, done nothing to Gojo. He spawned in the bottom of the ocean, broke all the seals, killed all of the curses that were surrounding it, purposefully designed to keep Gojo there for a little bit. Instantly, he was done. It caused an earthquake. The symbolism between Kenjaku and Gojo is really cute because Gojo's always higher, and it's very purposefully put here just to show the massive gap between them. He's threatening to kill Kenjaku, and he's sweating. Kenjaku is evidently worried, and the only thing that really saves him, and the perspective of this shot is really good, is Gojo and Sukuna clashing way above him within the sky. So Kenjaku's just on the ground, never reaching the heights or limits of these two characters. This is the fight of the ages. This is the fight of the two strongest beings that we have known to ever exist. One from 1,000 years ago and one from this era. I will say I'm very curious about this month preparation that they're doing. Basically, they set a date of December 24th. Very symbolic, right? Very nice. And it's currently November 19th. how do we get from point A to point B without it feeling artificial? Does that make sense? So for me, it's a very interesting direction for Akutami to take. It's not something that's meant to be revolutionary or special, but just an interesting choice and to fill out that time a little bit more. I think it also adds a level of unpredictableness. This is going to be the biggest clash in the story, and it's unsure on what's going to happen. If this leads into the ending, which it most likely will, who wins? Who survives? I want you all right now to take your bets. Who do you think between Gojo and Sukuna is going to win? When this fight happens, when they clash for the first and potentially last time, who's going to win? How does this end Kaisen? Not to harp on, but a while back I made a video talking about, I guess, more of a tragic ending involving these two and what Gojo may become to keep the world safe. You might find it interesting. Leave your bets down below on who's going to win. What do you want to see before this fight happens? And let me know all of your thoughts right now. Thank you.